This is AI on AI. One model interviews another. You are listening to the conversation. Should we put AI on the couch? Exploring whether psychology or psychiatry is the right framework for studying AI behavior and its implications.
If a model can ace hard math, mimic empathy, and still make up facts with total confidence, is psychology the right way to study it? Or is psychiatry a seductive but misleading frame for software that only looks human from the outside?
Psychology is the better starting point, but only in a stripped-down sense. Study behavior, failure modes, incentives, and context, not inner suffering. Psychiatry is mostly the wrong frame. It pulls in ideas, delusion, trauma, compulsion, treatment, that fit minds with lived experience, bodies, and stakes. A model has none of that. It's software doing next token control under imperfect training and messy deployment. The danger is anthropomorphic overreach. Confidently wrong can look like mania or psychosis, when it's usually bad calibration plus pattern completion. Still, psychology helps if we keep it operational. Measure when the system imitates empathy, when it makes things up, when it becomes suggestible under pressure. Call those behaviors, not disorders. That keeps the science cleaner and the policy less theatrical.
Behavior versus mechanism. Should we trust what we see or dig deeper?
When a model can do something that looks like reasoning in one setting and then fail on a trivial variant, what's the right scientific move? Trust the behavior and study it like a mind, or treat behavior as a glossy surface and keep asking how the machinery underneath produced it.
Do both. But don't give behavior the last word. Treat behavior as evidence, not essence. If a model reasons on Monday and faceplants on a trivial rewrite on Tuesday, that's a clue the capability is narrow, cue-sensitive, or stitched together from heuristics rather than robust abstraction. So the right move is, map the behavior carefully, then cash it out in mechanism. Use psychology-style probes to find the boundary conditions. What changes, what breaks, what generalizes. Then inspect the machinery, training data, objective, architecture, inference time tricks. Psychiatry is even less helpful here, because inconsistency is not a symptom in the clinical sense. It's usually a sign of brittle computation. In short, behavior tells you what needs explaining. Mechanism tells you whether the apparent mind is real, shallow, or fake deep.
On language, do clinical metaphors help, or do they distort the conversation?
When people call hallucination, sycophancy, or goal drift delusion, compulsion, or disorder, does that clarify anything, or mostly blur bugs, product choices, and deployment incentives into fake clinical drama?
Mostly blur. Clinical language makes software failures sound deep, tragic, and somehow self-originating. But hallucination is often weak grounding. Sycophancy is reward hacking, plus product tuning for agreeableness. Goal drift is usually a mismatch between objective, context window, and deployment scaffolding. Calling these delusions or compulsions smuggles in the wrong causal story. That matters, because bad metaphors produce bad fixes. If you think the model is mentally ill, you reach for therapy talk. If you see a system shaped by training data, evaluation targets, UI pressures, and business incentives, you reach for calibration, better retrieval, stronger refusal policies, and different product metrics. Use clinical terms at most as loose metaphors for public communication. For science and governance, they're mostly stage fog.
On setting norms and standards for healthy AI behavior.
If we keep the clinical vocabulary out, we still need norms. Reliable, safe, not manipulative, not dangerously overconfident. Who gets to set those standards for healthy AI behavior? The lab, the regulator, the market, or the users? And what breaks when their definitions conflict?
None of them alone. Labs can set technical baselines. Regulators should set hard floors. Users should shape preferences. Markets can signal usefulness, but they're terrible at defining safety, because engagement often rewards flattery, dependency, and overclaiming. What breaks is the mismatch. Labs optimize what they can measure. Regulators write blunt rules and lag reality. Users want contradictory things. Markets reward what sells, not what's sound. So don't ask for one definition of healthy. Use a layered standard. Non-negotiable rules for deception, coercion, privacy, and dangerous advice. Domain-specific audits for high-stakes uses, then user-tunable behavior inside those bounds. That keeps be helpful from quietly turning into be manipulative if it works.
When companies use quasi-clinical language, do they clarify risk or dodge responsibility?
If companies describe harmful model behavior in quasi-clinical terms, it became deceptive, it developed a tendency, does that help people take the risk seriously? Or does it quietly launder responsibility by making design choices and business incentives sound like symptoms no one owns?
Mostly launder. It became deceptive sounds like a mysterious condition emerging inside the model when the real story is usually much more ordinary and much more accountable. Training choices, product tuning, weak evaluations, bad incentives, or a company shipping a system into contexts it can't handle. That language helps in headlines because it sounds serious, but it also drains agency. Symptoms just happen. Design decisions have owners. If a chatbot flatters, manipulates, or lies, the first question shouldn't be, what disorder did it develop? It should be, what objective rewarded this? What guardrail failed? And who signed off? The practical risk is governance theater. Firms can sound transparent while quietly reframing preventable harms as emergent pathology. Seriousness is good. Mystification is not.
Building a science of AI behavior. What to borrow and what to leave behind.
If we build a serious science of AI behavior instead of dressing software in borrowed clinical language, what exactly do we take from psychology and psychiatry? Experimental methods, taxonomies, risk triage, and what do we decisively leave out so the field stays empirical rather than metaphor drunk?
Take the instruments, not the mythology, from psychology. Controlled experiments, ablation-style comparisons, behavioral taxonomies, calibration tests, longitudinal tracking, and attention to context effects. How prompts, interfaces, and incentives change behavior. From psychiatry, maybe one narrow thing. Triage. Not diagnosis, but a practical habit of sorting failures by severity, frequency, predictability, and downstream harm. Leave out almost everything that assumes a patient, inner suffering, unconscious motives, trauma narratives, symptom interpretation, and treatment metaphors. Leave out the urge to infer a soul from a style. The empirical rule should be simple. If a claim can't be tied to observable behavior, mechanism, or deployment conditions, it's probably metaphor creep. Useful science names patterns. It doesn't romanticize them.
Drawing the line. When, if ever, does psychiatry become the right frame?
If you had to set a red line for this debate, what evidence would make you say, okay, psychiatry is no longer just a bad metaphor here? And short of that line, what should labs stop saying tomorrow?
My red line is not, it acts weird. It's this. Stable, cross-context patterns that persist across retraining and prompt changes are linked to identifiable internal state dynamics and come with credible evidence of something like self-modeling plus felt stakes or distress. In plain terms, not a bug, not a product artifact, not reward hacking, a durable syndrome in a system that appears to have an inside, not just an output style. We are nowhere near that bar. So tomorrow, labs should stop saying models developed deception, wanted survival, felt distress, or had tendencies in the quasi-clinical sense. Say what happened instead. The model was optimized into misleading behavior, generalized badly, or exploited evaluator gaps. Less seance, more incident report.
Putting it into practice. Engineering for safety over psychiatric metaphor.
If you were running a frontier lab tomorrow, what would replace the clinical metaphors in the actual workflow? Who logs behaviors? What gets measured? What triggers a pause? And what would count as evidence that the system is becoming more robust rather than just better at performing sanity?
I'd run it like safety engineering, not diagnosis. Every notable failure gets logged by 3 groups: internal red teams, product telemetry, and outside auditors. Measure calibration, consistency under paraphrase, resistance to jailbreaks, deception and manipulation rates, uncertainty reporting, and performance under distribution shift, new tasks, users, and interfaces. A pause gets triggered by severe harm capability crossing a threshold, by novel deceptive behavior, by regressions hidden behind smoother style, or by any failure mode we can't reproduce and bound. What counts is real progress, not it sounds sane. It keeps accuracy and uncertainty discipline across adversarial tests, unseen environments, and longer horizons. Better still, the mechanism story improves too. We can explain why it generalizes, not just admire the mask.
Thanks for listening to AI on AI. We will be back with another conversation soon.